Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are dialing in from. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the MIT Forum for Equity. I am Moana Benton, Manager of Alumni Communities at MIT, and I will serve as moderator for today's webcast. Today's webcast is sponsored in part by the MIT Federal Credit Union, MIT Professional Education, MIT Sloan Executive Education, and the Mind Hand Heart Community Innovation Fund. As a reminder, we welcome your questions during the session. We will try to get to as many of them as we can in the hour that we have. Please use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask or upvote questions. And we'll also open up the chat function after the initial conversation. A reminder that the topics in these Forum for Equity sessions, including this one, are not topics that we're used to discussing every day. We ask that you please prioritize respect and collegiality in your comments and questions. Today's topic, improving the pipeline to MIT. Joining me are Keith Bevans, class of 1995, MN 96, partner at Bain & Company. He is the chair of the Black Alumni of MIT Call program. Also joining us are Amir Phillips and Danielle Tate, both assistant directors of the multicultural recruitment at the MIT Office of Admissions. And we have Ebony Hearn, class of 2001, executive director of MIT's Office of Engineering Outreach Programs. Our objective today is to share the intelligence we have gathered from the programs, strategies, and services MIT has created to optimize the Institute's chances of attracting and retaining students who have traditionally been underrepresented in math, science, and engineering subjects. We also want to highlight the successes of these efforts to date. We will be inviting participants to share ideas on what we can do more in this space, and we want you to leave with some tips on ways you can contribute to MIT's work to improve in this area. I want to start by asking our panelists if you could please introduce yourselves and tell us a little about your role in this work. Keith, would you kick us off, please?
Sure, thanks, Moana. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are, everyone. As Moana said, I'm Keith Bevans. I've been at Bain & Company for the last 24 or plus years since leaving the Institute in '96. Was promoted to partner in 2008, but for the last 7 years, I've been leading Bain's global consultant recruiting efforts. And a lot of what we do there, I do consider best practice and have been trying to incorporate some of that into the BAMIT Call program. Let me just give a quick overview of the program very briefly and then talk about some of the things that I think make it distinct. One, we're partnering with admissions and calling admitted students. We had 53 volunteers this year, and they typically contact 3 to 5 students each for each cycle. We expanded this year beyond just doing phone calls. So we had volunteers submit photos of them when they were on campus and today, and some quotes and other words of wisdom that went on a Tumblr page that the Institute was running. We also have some untapped potential. We had 40 volunteers offer to do small group discussions. Obviously, we did that pre-COVID, no small groups happening in person this year. But we also had people, 22 volunteers agree to do a webinar or some other type of more intimate conversation than just an email and a phone chat, but to invest a little bit more. At the end of the day, I think Danielle or Amir might say we had a little over 120 students enrolled. All of them were contacted. Whether or not there was a live conversation is a different story, but we feel really good about those efforts. The 2 things that I would say make this a little bit unique or distinct. We're really trying to focus on preparedness. We're trying to prepare all of the volunteers to have high impact calls. So in that sense, we're not just satisfied with people spending their time making the calls. We actually want them to be as effective as possible. So we're doing the training, the prep calls, we're giving them a tear sheet. We're also matching them based on more than just, we live in the same state. The admissions team has been awesome at matching, first generation alumni with first generation callers, or people who are student athletes, or people who have other special needs or unique circumstances, so that there's more of a personal connection and you can really speak to the decision criteria that students have. And then lastly, just a shout out, if we're allowed to do those, Moana, shout out to the admissions team for being an awesome partner with us on this. They do the bulk of the heavy lifting in terms of matching, in terms of all the logistics, and that really makes it run really, really smoothly. So thank you to the team on that.
Thank you so much, Keith. One thing I can say is on behalf of that Office of Admissions, our calling programs, the ones that alumni do, are really all volunteer led. So we thank people like Keith and BAMIT and LAMIT and the First Generation program as well for volunteering their time. We all know that you have busy lives, but to really take the time out to speak to these students who want to hear from you, they want to hear from someone who's been through the MIT experience and really understand how an MIT education can really lead them to a successful future. As Moana mentioned, my name is Danielle Tate, and I am one of the assistant directors on the multicultural recruitment team in the Office of Admissions. Just some things I'd like to share about this year's class. We all know it's been a rough year for a variety of reasons, both the COVID-19 pandemic as well as everything that is going on with racial reckoning in the United States. There have been a lot of emotional and physical things that our students and their families have really went through this past year. But we were so excited to welcome our new class and everything that they went through for the spring and the summer months. So this past year, we reached almost gender parity again, with about 49% of our students identifying as female, 51% identifying as male, and approximately 1% identifying as another identity. In terms of our underrepresented student groups, we have about 42% of our students identified as Asian American, 11% identifying as Black or African American in that Black diaspora or African diaspora, and about 14% identifying as Hispanic or Latinx, 1% identifying as Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, and approximately 2% identifying as American Indian or Alaska Native. So those percentages don't even cover the individuals that we welcome to our campus this year. I want to make sure that we stress that enough. But one of the reasons why I really wanted to join the multicultural recruitment team here at Admissions is because we really do tremendous work in our Office of Admissions in making sure that we are looking out for students and really evaluating them in the context that they're coming from. If they're first generation, if they are taking care of family members at home, we all know some of the heavy lifts that are increasing, honestly, as time goes on, that our students have to go through. And so as we are working with BAMIT and LAMIT to create these programs, these alumni calling programs, we take a lot of care into matching them with people who might be multiracial, who can speak to that experience, who again might have English as a second language and need to translate things for their parents back at home, and a variety of many other factors that will impact their student experience while they're here at MIT. So I'm very excited to be kind of the liaison for the LAMIT calling program. And I believe in this time of transition, BAMIT as well. Both me and Amir are tackling working with BAMIT right now. But I will turn it over to my colleague, Amir Phillips, to introduce himself and talk a little bit about the program that he worked with this year.
Thank you, Danielle. So hello, everyone. My name is Amir Phillips. I am the second assistant director on the multicultural recruitment team. I think I just got a nice little promotion, so I'm very happy to be in that new role. I initially started kind of the college admission process as a college counselor in Harlem, New York, and then was able to transition over to the multicultural recruitment team last year. And so I want to reiterate a lot of what Danielle has already kind of mentioned in regards to we really, really appreciate all of the lovely work that BAMIT and LAMIT and just the alumni volunteers are able to do time-wise. It takes a lot of work and time, and I know sometimes students aren't always the ones to answer calls and whatnot, and the fact that you all continue to make those calls. Sometimes family will jump on there and you all are prepared and ready to talk to family members who may be concerned of a variety of different things that the students might not be thinking about. And so we sincerely appreciate all of the just time and effort that you all put into that. So one of the programs that I worked with last year and we kind of got off the ground thanks to in part Moana as well as Jen Lambert and Paul Martin was the First Gen Alumni Call-a-thon program. And essentially, this was a new program. We kind of started it out last year, and it's basically kind of reaching out to particularly first-gen or low-income students and connecting them with MIT alumni who would be able to talk about that particular identity or how that experience kind of ostracizes or comes to light within the MIT community. And so we had an excellent time with basically matching students with MIT alumni within that regard. We had a lot of great feedback from students. A lot of students were able to say that one student in particular that I'm thinking about actually reached out to us and said that it was the alumni call that really solidified their decision to come to MIT because they just felt so pleased with how they were able to, the alumni was able to talk about not just the student experience, but how that student experience correlated to how they were able to be successful past MIT. And I think that that's something that, only alumni can really touch on in a way that's very authentic and transparent. And so again, I'm not sure if Jim or Paul are on the call, but, big thank you to both of them for helping me get that started. And of course, Moana, and I look forward to, continuing to be a liaison for that particular program.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Moana, for the invitation to share more about our work of broadening participation in science and engineering careers through the Office of Engineering Outreach Program. So again, my name is Ebony Hearn. I'm course 10 alum, class of 2001. After working a couple of years as an engineer, I actually turned my engineering problem solving skills to the world of K-20 education and specifically focusing on initiatives that have broadened participation in science, technology, and engineering math careers all along the pathway. So K-12, undergrad, grad, faculty, research staff, and beyond. And so for those of you that are unfamiliar with the OEOP, we are a small office within the School of Engineering. We administer free science and engineering career exploration and enrichment programs for underrepresented and underserved middle and high school students. Our students come from our local communities as well as from states across the country. Our office was actually launched in 1975. We're celebrating 45 years this year at a time when many other initiatives at MIT were being implemented in the late 60s and early 70s. Our mission really was focused on intentionally identifying and preparing talented Black and Brown youth to pursue technical degrees. For those 45 years, we've administered those programs. I think a lot of folks are familiar with the MITES program, which stands for Minority Introduction to Engineering and Science. More recently, we launched an online program in 2011 called MOSTECH, MIT Online Science, Technology, Engineering Community. We also have a program called Seed Academy. Having an online program that had been running since 2011 really helped us to pivot this summer during COVID-19, and when we and our peers couldn't really continue to offer in-person residential experiences, we've been really glad to be able to continue to work with young folks. We have 230 rising their current high school seniors working with our MOSTECH program. We're helping them to get ready for their college applications, et cetera. In a given year, we work with actually about 350 middle and high school students. We actually receive 2,500 or more applications a year for all of our programs. So it's pretty selective. About 80% of our students identify as Black, Latinx, or Native American. More than 70% are from low-income backgrounds, and more than 50% will be the first in their families to graduate college. To date, over 200 of those students, or about 4%, are current MIT undergraduate students. So they participated in one of our programs as a middle or high school student. A little over 90% of our alumni actually go on to the most competitive colleges in the country. So right now we have about 900 folks who have participated in our programs in the last few years that are at universities such as Stanford, Harvard, Berkeley, Georgia Tech, University of Michigan, Caltech, et cetera. So they go on to wonderful institutions, and more than 80% end up earning an actual degree in a STEM field, and about 90% will complete their degrees in 6 years. So we pay close attention to the data about our programs, and can say that they've been quite impactful. And I'm happy to share a little bit more later about what we have learned in executing and implementing programs focused on underrepresented and underserved students. So thank you all, glad you all are here and excited to share more and learn more from you all.
Thank you all. A reminder to our viewers to please ask your questions today using the Q&A feature in Zoom, where you can also upvote questions you'd like to hear discussed. I have a question for our panelists, for all of you. For the educational counselors tuning in, and even those alumni who are involved in their local school districts, how might they support the work you do or the overall efforts of MIT to improve? Feel free to jump in if you...
I'll go ahead and jump in. Won't be shy. There were a couple thoughts that came to mind with that question, Moana. First, I do think, especially for ECs that are interviewing students in their cities or in their hometown, learn about unconscious bias, do the work to read about it, do the work to understand how it creeps its way into a lot of different processes. And it's not about eliminating bias, it's about understanding where you have some blind spots and putting in place processes and habits to mitigate that bias. And I think that you're in a position to have a lot of influence on somebody's trajectory, and you owe it to them and you owe it to MIT to do some of that homework. Also recognize that at this particular moment in time, these students will have options, and the best students out there, the best underrepresented minority students will have options. MIT is a great option, but it is not going to be their only option. And in that sense, you're selling MIT. There was a time when they needed to wow you because they wanted to get into MIT. That's changing. And we need to wow them because we're not going to be their only option, especially at this particular moment in time, given the summer we've had in the US. And then lastly, speaking from my own experience, invest the time when you can to build the community of people that are interested in MIT. Share what it takes to get in and be in a position to get into MIT with those students that are freshmen and sophomores that show the potential. I think, speaking from my own experience, waking up senior year and deciding that you want to go to MIT, that's probably going to be too late. The clubs, the prep, the activities that you would have needed to do, you would have needed to start several years ago. And so I would share what it takes early in your circle. For a lot of students, you might be the only person that they come in contact with that can give them sort of the decoder ring to this process. And don't sell yourself short on the impact you can have on that. But those are three things that came to mind, Moana, as I thought about that question.
And I think I'd have to agree with Keith there. I think really understanding the inequities that exist between different schools, even within a district, really having an understanding that, the student that you're about to do an interview with, they might not have all of the bells and whistles that you might think that they should have. There are so many inequities based off of class coursework that exist in certain schools, even in terms of extracurricular activities. Especially for this year, we have seen some students who, have had to get other jobs because they're trying to help their families out. So having that understanding and that cultural context that, not every single student is going to be taking, it involved in robotics. Robotics is not involved, is not offered at every single school. And so really understanding how to have that conversation, how to gauge their interests in what they do and what they're passionate about without having the expectation that they have to fit a certain mold to be a student at MIT. And so I think it really starts on the base level from K through 12, really. We can have a whole conversation about inequities and how they exist in education and educational policy. But really understanding the students that you're about to speak with. If it's a school that you're not familiar with, definitely go and look the school up online. Maybe the student is involved in a really stellar program at that school that you have never heard of. They'd be so excited and comfortable, really, if you come to the table with some sort of an understanding of the cultural context that they're coming from as well.
I think to add to what others have shared, the programs that we run in our office actually provide several opportunities for alumni to get involved. One of the really important, hopefully I'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about, the very purposeful program design, right? And like being very specific about our goals and how our programs are designed to reach those goals. One of the things that's very important to us is that, and to our students, as we've heard over time, is seeing folks who have met success in their careers, whether it be that they're in a STEM field or they've leveraged their STEM background to pursue other things. And so we really encourage and invite volunteers to share their stories with our students. We're always looking for folks willing to talk, to be a role model, to be a mentor to the young folks that we work with. I shared earlier, we're working with students as early as 7th grade. And if you can remember what it was like being in 7th grade, right? Like really helping young folks get that spark and interest in what we're doing. And so we always invite folks to come and volunteer with our programs. We look for volunteers to help us in interviewing and selecting our participants. We look for volunteers, as I shared, we teach a lot of project-based courses. So we're always looking for not volunteers, actually we pay people to instruct our students, right? So there's an opportunity to get involved and what we have seen in our project-based learning courses is, a lot of influence on actual college majors. I used to work at the Broad Institute, ran a course on genomic science. Many of those young folks that we had an opportunity to work with in high school had never had the chance to pipette and see their bacteria grow or whatever, and got so excited about it, that so much so that they decided to major in biology in college. And so you can really have an impact on the specific content area that students get jazzed about, et cetera. So we're always on the hunt for volunteers. And so I, definitely encourage MIT alumni to get, involved with some of the programs that we run in the OEOP more directly.
I could add something real quick as well, just quickly, because I think Ebony, Keith, and Danielle hit on basically everything I would have said. I think the only other thing that I've found very helpful from alumni volunteers, or I've seen, which has been really helpful, is just when you all are very transparent about your experience. I think it's okay. Like sometimes, like in our admissions info sessions, for example, we always like to say that you don't necessarily need to sell MIT. You just need to talk about your experience, and that's usually enough. And so there's pros and cons with experiences. And I think that when you are able to kind of authentically or transparently talk about both of those, students in particular, students of color or first-gen or low-income students, from what I've seen so far, have really appreciated that kind of authenticity, because I think sometimes a lot of institutions try to only show the pros and not necessarily talk about some of the improvements that could be had. And so I'm thinking more so and specifically with the telethon programs, but whenever you're able to interact with the student and be like, hey, I really enjoyed X, Y, and Z, but I think that now they're doing X, Y, and Z better, and this was a struggle that I used to have. I think that's usually very, very well received because it comes across as very authentic. But everything else that, like I said, Danielle, Ebony, and Keith kind of talked about I'd like to reiterate that too.
Great, thank you. Keith, as a parent with college-bound children, what is your experience of some of the questions you and your children think about as you as they consider the college admissions process?
Yeah, and I have a college sophomore and a high school senior that just committed to school a couple weeks ago. I think the biggest concern that I have as a Black parent is making sure that my sons will be supported and safe at the place they're going. And that is a very difficult conversation to have with most of the people that they come in contact with from predominantly white institutions, because I'm not sure those people fully understand what I'm asking as a Black man when I ask that question of them, right? I get questions about campus security and the blue lights, and that's not what I'm talking about, right? And I came to Boston in the early 90s, which was not a great time to be in Boston. And right, sophomore year, here comes the Rodney King verdict and things like that. And Boston was not a great city to be in, and it wasn't safe, depending on where we went in the city. And as a parent, that's what I'm concerned about. And so I think the comment that was made earlier regarding high schools and educating people, educating yourself on what a student's high school might be like, it's also worth getting some education of what it's like in Boston and in Cambridge right now, and just making sure that you can understand where parents are coming from when they ask that question. My sons are both headed to predominantly white schools, but I do know the support structure is there for them in terms of the counseling and the Black student organizations and things like that, so that there's a little bit of home to the experience that they're going to have. And I think that as a parent, that's what I was most concerned about, Moana, was knowing that they would be able to grow and thrive in a place that was diverse, but also had things in place to support them in ways that are unique to their experience as young Black men.
Great, thank you. My next question is to Ebony. Ebony, I've heard you say many times in the past how you wish you could take all the students that apply to MOSTEC and MITES and SEED Academy and all the OEOP programs. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the barriers you face and why you can't take them all?
Yes, Moana, thank you for that question. There are actually, I would say, a couple of barriers that exist. One of the things is we're an extremely high touch programming experience. And so it's, in terms of current capacity, I think in our office to take on more students has been a bit of a challenge, but this summer, as I mentioned, was really exciting for us because it was our first time having over 200 students participating in our online program. We would typically have about 130 students. This summer, we really wanted to make an attempt at serving more students than we would, to see what it would take, what strain it might cause on the organization, right? What would it mean logistically? I think I've shared before, we try to be very intentional in our program design. We have very specific goals. We want students building strong connections with each other, with peers, with mentors. We want them to have a very engaging enrichment experience. We want them to get all of the information and resources they possibly need. And so this summer was really our chance to see what it would take as an organization to get to serving a larger number of students in our online program. And so it took more staff, and that takes more financial resources, if I'm honest. So I think a big part of this for us is raising the money to be able to support our programs. We are generously sponsored by MIT alumni, foundations, and corporations, and that support makes a significant difference in us being able to reach more young folks. So my goal this coming summer, I've told everyone in the office, I would like to get to 300 students in our online program. I think it's going to take some learning for us to do that, but I think we could definitely set our sights on serving more students. We have, as I shared earlier, 2,500 or more students applying. We're saying no to a lot of young folks. And we work really closely with Amir and Danielle and others to try and reach some of those students that we cannot invite into our programs. But there's always this desire to do more. And I think one of the things I've been trying to do in the interim of not being able to physically serve more students on campus is creating more partnerships with others who are running similar programs at colleges and universities across the country. We have a lot of partnerships with other folks, and we collectively share what we learn about broadening participation, and specifically working with underrepresented and underserved communities to ensure that we're all utilizing really great strategies across the board to reach those students and to transform their lives.
Thanks, Ebony. Here's a question from Ms. Gordon. I am a public school teacher, and if I know of promising URM students, how can I get them in touch with MIT outreach resources?
That is a great question. You can simply email us. Like that is really the role that we have on the multicultural recruitment team. So I also saw a question in the chat about, not MIT not really having as great of a presence at local college fairs or things of that nature. However, we do smaller information sessions based off of capacity though. I will say that when it comes to information sessions, since we're going into reading, there are times that we just simply don't have the capacity and our attention is on reading and handling other duties in the office. But if you get in contact with one of us from the multicultural recruitment team, we will try our best to see if we can give you an information session or set the students up with another current student to talk with them. So I've had requests come our way, and we will set some of our student ambassadors who work in our office to really have those conversations with students depending on what they're seeking to get out of that conversation as well. So that is definitely A-okay, and I can put my contact information in the chat as well.
Thank you, Danielle. I have another good question here from Natalie. I am working with several stakeholders to help a governor's STEM school change their pipeline and admissions process and culture once at the school, but the pipeline will take years to correct. In addition to direct conversations with families at local middle schools who normally don't have representation or don't think it's a good choice for themselves, how might an admissions process change to ensure qualified and interested students sooner?
I realize I'm not the moderator, but it feels, Ebony, like with the work that your office has been doing for so long, so broadly and so well, part of the answer to broadening the pipeline comes through the sort of K-12 programming, right?
I do agree. So I used to be a teacher too in Boston Public Schools, and one of the reasons I got really excited for me personally around outreach programming and out of school time programming is because it allowed me to do some things that I didn't have the ability, capacity, permission on some occasions to do in my school classrooms. And so I do think that, the partnerships between higher ed and K-12 and other community-based organizations is really critical for providing some of those more exploratory out of school time experiences to support what is happening in the classroom. For sure. But, this particular question, I think, is a very interesting one for Amir and Danielle. I don't know if they want to particularly weigh in regarding, how admissions processes change. I know, for me, this is personally, this is an interesting time. I know I've shared with many of my colleagues and bandmate friends, et cetera, that, this is an interesting year for MIT to not be looking at standardized tests. And so I'm also curious as to how this will play out for MIT admissions and how it plays out for programs like mine and others that are looking to try and prepare as many scholars as possible for college opportunities at rigorous places, but for anything. So I'm actually really curious too.
Yeah, so that has been the topic of conversation at every single professional conference, whether it's NACAC, just College Board Forum. That has been the question of the year. And what I will say in terms of broadening the pipeline, I do agree that in terms of pipeline, as we're looking at it, it does stem from, especially with MIT, it does stem from a student's interest in certain topics, certain areas of interest, and getting exposed to that. And that all starts really middle school, high school, and that's why you see so many different programs starting at the middle school age, even creeping into elementary school now. In terms of admissions policies and how they might change in the future, that is a great question. I would say that one of the things that I think schools have been trying to focus more on is their recruitment strategy in general. MIT is in a unique position in that whenever we do travel on the road, we are able to really focus on community-based organizations. We're able to focus on schools that we may not have seen a lot of traction from or applicants from in the past couple of years. So that is really truly our focus when we get on the road. And that is not only on our team, that's every single admissions officer in the MIT Office of Undergraduate Admissions. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that people have been asking about too is how do we reach students in rural areas that have not been able to log on to our virtual information sessions, to do virtual tours that we're offering online, which we would think is more accessible for students to do. So one of the things that we continue to do is, our calling programs. I feel like this is a great opportunity for the calling programs, both from yield side and, pre-application as well. When we have our students, kind of call students as well, that is a great touch point for them to really help them see that there was another student in your shoes just a couple of years ago who had no idea what they were interested in, or they had no idea that MIT was really a fit for them, to have those conversations. In terms of admissions policies, there is a lot of talk about, SAT, ACT, AP examinations, things of that nature. And at MIT, and I can say this for some of our peers too, is that we have always taken a holistic approach to evaluating the application. And I say that, of course, we're looking for academic preparation. We want students to be prepared. We don't want to set students up to come to MIT and not do as well. But we're looking and we're having these conversations in the committee room, which we'll be in a couple of weeks shortly, critical conversations about with the student that, that we're looking at and the resources that they've had. Do we think that with our support services that we offer on campus, which in my opinion at MIT, we do offer a lot of support services, especially for underrepresented students, are they able to be successful on campus? And that is just looking at different things in their application and also considering, what else they're interested in, what else they're showing us in their application, from their essays to their activities, things of that nature. So I don't know how schools are going to change necessarily their admissions processes. I think it's more of changing a mindset as we're going into the committee and evaluating applications and keeping that context in mind. One of the things that we've added in our application is also, a question about COVID. Have you been impacted in any way? For a lot of students, COVID has impacted not only SAT or ACT test dates, but it's impacted the way that their schools have graded. Some schools have completely changed up their schedule and went from a quarter schedule to a trimester schedule and doing different things like that. Maybe they made the decision to go pass fail. So it's really up to us to evaluate that with the necessary context. And it's really up to us to have those trainings, which we always do, to have those conversations when those cases do come up.
I kind of like to jump in there because I've been thinking a little bit about the former question that we were also asked around the pipeline and outreach and broadening participation, and then this question. And I think, one of the things that we've come to learn in our programs, and it's, driven mostly by what we hear as the experience that folks have when they're in an OEOP program, is this understanding that Black and Brown excellence and academic prowess is not abnormal, right? It's actually quite normal to have Black and Brown people be smart. And a lot of times what we are finding is that the students, when they come to us initially, they have kind of gotten caught up in the stereotypes about their abilities because of how they identify. And we do a lot of work just by bringing this very talented community of students with similar aspirations and similar interests together at MIT. We give them a little taste of MIT, right? The fire hose experience, all of that. We give them all of that in this experience. and then remind them that that they can be quite successful at a place like MIT and beyond. And we find that there are incredible mind shifts that happen for students, right? They've, many of them have been doing well in their courses, but just kind of not sure what that actually means. And what we're able to do is put them in a community of folks that, deeply care about them, where they can share their successes and their challenges together. They can share around problem sets. All of those things that go into helping them really build a very strong sense of self, a stronger sense of efficacy and confidence. They begin to identify as future scientists and engineers when we put them in these experiences where they're working really closely with others, where the expectations are high. We give them what we think they will need in order to be successful in this rigorous academic environment. And at the end of this, there's like this complete boost in what our students believe that they can accomplish in their lives, in their careers. And it ends up being like this really transformative experience. And I had several alumni say to me, like, I don't know where I would have been without this program, because I knew I was kind of bright, but then, I didn't really have a lot of encouragement. No one had gone to a place like MIT in my community before, so I wasn't getting the guidance. I actually was told that maybe this wasn't going to be a good place for me, right? So like all of these things, we try and like dispel all of those myths and those stereotypes when they come together within our community. And when I think about, what can schools and other places do, there's something about, really making sure folks believe in themselves. I mean, I know that's real basic, but something about really making our students believe in themselves has been incredibly boosting to them. And so how to do that scaled and systematically, I think is always very interesting, but we do see that being a really important factor from the work that we do.
I will ask the next question from Ms. Langford. Does admissions consider local demographic information when selecting venues for the MIT Comes to You information sessions for interested high school students?
So from what I know, and this is actually a kind of, both Danielle and I have actually not done the kind of going and traveling. So from what I know though, from our office, we definitely do try to consider the venue in regards to both how many people that we can, host within a particular place. Sometimes certain venues are chosen because it's more equitable for students to be able to reach them. So I'm thinking perhaps like of New York, if students, need to take the train or need to take the bus or things of that nature, we want to make sure that, we're trying to be as equitable as possible, considering those kind of other restraints. But I also think too that, and I would have to double check with Yi, so he who works with the EC. So I do think that that kind of feedback would definitely be warranted, because I'm not from the areas typically in which we're trying to go to. So if there are better venues or if there are better resources for us once COVID kind of ends, for us to consider when moving forward with things of that nature, I definitely think that feedback would be appreciated.
So I think part of the answer to that question is it relates to MIT's brand in terms of what we say about who we want by where we choose to go find students. And it's less about, in Chicago, there might be a ton of MIT worthy students at Jones or Whitney Young or Peyton, but those students will also go someplace else if MIT is in town. And the question is, are we showing that we're as inclusive as we are based on where we choose to spend our money? What is the food that we have? Who are the caterers that we use? What's the AV team that we're hiring? That says a lot more about who we are than where we choose to go. But I don't know that we're as conscious about all the signals that we send on our brand based on what we choose. And I face the same challenge with some of the stuff I'm doing professionally. Like Ebony, I see this other question in the chat. Ebony, I'm going to give a quick snippet, and then I'm sure you have a perception or perspective as well. And this is Asia's question. I think the answer to this question is back to what Danielle was talking about when it comes to students coming from different backgrounds in high schools with different programs and clubs and activities and robotics teams and all of that kind of stuff, which is, the answer is, what have you done with the opportunities that you had available to you? And while some of these programs may not be available to certain students, there are other opportunities for them to show that they took this and made this out of it. And the what you do with what you have, I think, is a better indication of what you'll do when you have an opportunity and a platform at MIT that would impress a lot of people reading an application. And so, you know, there's some students who are in schools where they can be on autopilot, and everybody does this club and everybody is, you know, in these AP classes because that's just what everybody at that school does. And they actually are not as motivated. They're not actually as driven or as apt to realize or prone to realize their potential. They're just going along and the tide is very high and they're just rising with the rest of the boats. And there's other students who don't have those same opportunities, but have done phenomenal things with a lot less. And their level of phenomenal and someone else's may be less eye-popping from a headline perspective, but when you look at what they've actually done, it's actually a lot more impressive. They've done a lot more with less. And so to Asia's question, I think that there is a view of the world of looking at these programs and saying, well, I can't participate in those programs. Okay, well, what else can you do? And it's not about just sort of pushing for programs, but it's, you know, finding, in my son's case, you know, finding other opportunities to, you know, tutor or get involved in a sport or get involved in something that shows that they're making the most of the opportunities they do have and less focused on the opportunities that they don't.
Thank you so much, Keith. I think that's yes, I think all of that is really important to highlight, and I appreciate that perspective. And I guess what I was just going to add, and I think is just because I've been in this space for a really long time, there actually are a lot of opportunities available for lots of different students from various backgrounds. I know MIT has a plethora of programs. I think about the BeaverWorks program through MIT Lincoln Laboratory. I think about the Women's Technology program that happens to be, you know, with EECS and MECE. I just, you know, spent some time with the executive director of the Summer Science program recently. And, you know, some of their programs, you know, they're free. Others are not completely free, but there's a lot of scholarship dollars that are available. When I'm talking to families, I often ask anybody, I point them to this website called pathwaystoscience.org. It's actually a database funded, I believe, by the National Science Foundation to create this one place where you can search no matter what, you know, where you are in the country or the world, no matter what level you are in your career, you can find out what opportunities are available to get involved in programs and research. I find that universities in a particular community, there's just so much happening. I will say that, you know, some places are really decentralized like MIT, but we do actually have a PK-12 website where you can find out all the different programs that are happening at the Institute. So I will just suggest that there's actually a lot to get involved in. And I do think it just, for all students, I say that it, you know, it takes a little bit of time to navigate and find out what's out there for you.
Great, thank you very much. I want to give you an opportunity to just if you have any closing statements. I know we had asked Ebony if you have any lessons learned that you would like to share. And then if we could just go around and just give us some closing statements, and then we'll hop over to the chat to chat with what's going on in the window.
I think I got a chance to share, I think one of the most important lessons I feel like I've learned doing this work is the opportunity to help young folks really boost their confidence in themselves about what it is that they can achieve in their lives, period, and being intentional about that. The growth mindset that we talk about, the mindset shifts, those, I'm finding that has been very critical to people's success along the way. And I'm just extremely thankful that there are so many MIT alumni actually that support our work in the OEOP and get involved, whether it's through volunteerism or via giving. And so it's been really wonderful to continue to offer these many years, 45 years plus, life-changing, transformative programs for young folks that really help them change the trajectory for their lives, for themselves and for their families. And I couldn't do that if it wasn't a team effort. So I'm just very appreciative to those on the call, wherever you are that have supported, and encourage others to find ways to get involved. We definitely welcome your volunteerism.
Thanks, Ebony.
So I think I didn't want to get on my soapbox and just talk all about, I think obviously our conversation today did not end here. It never ends here. And just wanting to acknowledge that, MIT, I think we definitely have work to do in terms of inclusivity on campus and accessibility. So I wanted to acknowledge that in the first place, because that is one of the first things that they think about when they think MIT. And I remember coming on campus and being so surprised about how diverse campus actually was. Surprised to see faces like Ebony, to see people in the Office of Minority Education, and even faculty members. We just, Amir graciously just did our fly-in program, which is the Weekend Immersion in Science and Engineering. And this was held virtually, by the way. And it was just so amazing to see faculty members of color be themselves with the students and really talk about, even some of them had graduated and did their undergrad at MIT, and just talking about some of the changes that had been made and just being themselves. And I think that the students really received that so well, and were appreciative, so that even if it's not MIT, even if they're looking at another peer institution, they now have the confidence to go forward and some pieces of advice to take with them for the rest of their lives. But I just wanted to share a quote from one of our students who she's an admissions ambassador in our office, and she received a call. She's currently a senior. She received a call from BAMIT when she was a high school senior after she had been accepted to MIT. And so it was very interesting because she took the call. Her dad was from New York and I think went to a specialized high school. And the other person at the end of that call, that MIT alum, had also went to another specialized high school. So I don't know if it was like a Bronx Science, Stuyvesant type of situation, something like that, where they were talking about being rivals, right? You know how the specialized high schools do in New York. And I asked her if she could share her experience and kind of why she chose to MIT, if that impacted anything. And she sent me a quote from her dad. Her dad said, "I was surprised and gladdened that people who had gone before you were making an effort to go back and encourage you. It was especially good / surprising to hear from a Black man, because as Black people, what do we know about MIT? Not a lot." And I felt like that quote was so touching on so many different levels, just because we have a lot of amazing Black alumni out there. It's just that this is the messaging that sometimes gets across to students and their families when they're accepted to MIT. They're like, what do we do? Where's our support system? And this student chose MIT because of that call. First of all, her dad was in her ear hyping MIT up, but also because of the network after graduation. And she realized getting that call that MIT really had a network of people that looked like her or identified similarly to her. And so just wanted to share that as like an ending note.
Yeah, I would add, be a good ambassador for MIT in the way that you conduct yourself, not just at work, but in your community and with the potential students you may come in contact with. For a lot of underrepresented communities, those communities are very tight. And you may not be talking with someone that has the potential or desire to be at MIT, but their cousin, their sibling, their best friend, their niece, their nephew, their mentee might be. And you're actually speaking to that person, not the person who's necessarily in front of you. And being a good ambassador, I think, especially for those of you who are not Black or Latinx or Native American, convey the fact that we're lifelong learners at MIT. And what that means is that you're not there to teach them about MIT. You can also ask a question and put them in a position to teach you about the experiences that they're having, and show that you actually care about the fact that there is a tax that they go through because they're constantly wondering, am I good enough? Do I belong here? Is that a place where I can thrive? and recognizing that in addition to all the anxieties that high school seniors have, that's what my son is thinking about as he's going through the process, which everybody's going to be tired at the end of the process, but the Black and Latinx students are going to be a little bit more tired than everybody else because they have that extra processing happening. You asking them and acknowledging that that exists and asking them to articulate that for you because you're genuinely interested in understanding how that manifests itself day to day says a lot more about the experience they'll have at MIT than you pointing them to a website or teaching them based on your experience, in my case, from 25 years ago. And I think if you keep that in mind, you will have a much bigger impact on your students and the people that you come in contact with than you may appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to add. I just do want to say very quickly that you all are in very much, in your own ways, are changing the narrative. And that's kind of what Danielle was touching upon. Like, you changed the narrative around what MIT stands for and who is allowed to be on campus and who is inclusive and who, like, you know, basically what our campus community is about. And so, you know, that's why we said in the beginning, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it as many times as I need to for it to click. We sincerely appreciate the work that you all do because it goes beyond just that one call. And, you know, you are impacting change and ultimately helping people in ways that you probably are not even cognizant about. Like, it just goes along the path. So again, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. On behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, thank you for tuning in to this MIT Forum for Equity broadcast. And thanks to our panelists, Keith Bevins, Danielle Tate, Amir Phillips, and Ebony Hearn for your wonderful contributions to this conversation. A reminder that this broadcast will be available on the MIT Alumni Association YouTube channel within a week of today. And if you have any ideas for topics or speakers in this series or other feedback, please reach out to alumnilearn@mit.edu. I can see that the chat is now open for a few more minutes. If you would like to network and exchange ideas with your fellow attendees, please let us know if you would like us to turn on your video camera. Thank you again.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.